julep, julep,
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Learn It Live. Today it's Thursday, which means we're going to dive in and learn something about Webflow. Today, specifically, it's going to be interactions. So we're going to build some basic interactions onto an existing client-first template. We'll add a little sidebar, a pop-up modal, and a little scroll call to action as the user scrolls down the page. So we'll kill that in the background. What's up, Jogi? I'm like extra nervous because usually I get a little bit nervous, but now, you know, we crashed Tuesday. I'm actually going to be like teaching. It's been a long time since I've like built live. So anyway, Joe, thoughts as we get started here?
Well, I'm hoping for no crash. We can hope that, but if we do crash, we're going to try to get back. If we can get back, we'll let you know. We're investigating deeply into this issue, and we're going to make an investment to fix it. But for now, who knows what happens?
Yeah.
However, we should have a plenty of time to learn here, right? It only happens 40 minutes in or so. So I think we have a really nice opportunity to get into interactions. And this one's especially good for people on the beginner side, people who are just getting into Webflow, and maybe you're using interactions, but maybe you're not using it in the right way. So it's going to be a good episode. We haven't done anything specifically on interactions yet.
Yeah. And it's funny because I, when I first like came over to Finsweet, I was playing with the idea of like an interactions course, and then it kind of fell by the wayside, but I'm going to pull a couple of those things out. And we'll show some of those things. We'll dive into the template and whatnot, but we have a couple little announcements first. So let's do this real quick. Let's go into this view. And again, we're going to remind y'all of the open house. Go ahead and fill this out. If you're interested in getting involved, just click here. Not a lot happens once you fill in this information, but we will start sending you event updates as we get closer to that. So it's going to be, a super exciting event. We talk about that on the Tuesday streams. You'll hear a lot more about that coming up over the next few months. We also just launched a couple of articles here. This is from the previous Learn It Live stuff. So this stuff is available now. The CMS performance, big wins for attributes. So this kind of breaks down all of the different performance upgrades that attributes is bringing to the table and why those are important. And we also did the attributes versus JetBoost update. So that content is there and available for folks as well. We'll share those links in the comments as well as the description of the video here. So let's see. Oh, the only other thing I wanted to mention is we're talking about client first a little bit. And where is this here? That's not it. Where's my client first? I had it up here. Okay. Well, on the client first site, yeah, we'll go to showcase. And there's this little showcase here that we're building. So if you're building anything with client first, anything you'd like to showcase here, be sure to submit your projects to that. We're going to be doing a lot more content around client first stuff, and we'd like to make sure we highlight community content. So if you've built anything with client first or, have something cool on the sidelines you'd like to share with us, feel free to send that in there. And I think with that said, Joe, any thoughts?
I'll add to that. We had a plan to update this showcase monthly. We get a lot of submissions in, and we've been going through and selecting them. And we originally did this monthly. It's a manual process. And I've just put in the request to make this either a weekly or a bi-weekly update. We're seeing more submissions. We want to build this showcase, and we're dating everything. So don't wait. Be one of the earlier projects that have submitted. So when we add that filter and you go to earliest projects, you're up there.
Yeah.
So please, we're seeing so many of these projects in Twitter. Just take the extra time to share. It may lead to some future business or a future connection, or just sharing work is great.
Yep.
So go do that.
Okay, and like we typically do, just real quick, we'll run through and say what's up to the folks here sharing their thoughts in the beginning. Urban Pixel, what's up? Good morning as well. It's jumping into the afternoon for some of us, so shout out to whatever time it is, wherever in the world you're watching. Jay Poucher in the house. Dale Jensen, what's up? Maria. Mustafa, Rock and Roll CEO, what's going on, bud? Aida is here. Fernando, what's up? Christopher Coleman in the house. Owana, Kyle Piticelli, Michael Collins is here. What's up, Eric, Jorg, Robert? Man, there's a bunch of y'all here. Ukulele, what's up, bud? Daniel Nichols is in the house. Jeff McAvoy, let's say recent subscriber. Happy to catch a live. Yeah, happy to have you here. This one's going to be fun. We're going to dive into some interaction stuff. And I think we can just go ahead and get right into that. Let's get into this side view here. And let me close some tabs out because we're going to be jumping back around. I guess we could do like an intro to some of these interactions because we're not going to deal with like the basic interactions that Webflow sets, but most of the stuff that we are going to do will be fairly basic interactions. So if you're looking for like some Joseph Barry or Joe Moore design level interaction stuff, we're not going to cover that in this episode. I think most people, you know, the goal is to get you to understand how interactions work and how you can start bringing those into your site. And then we'll show you how you can push that. So I'll show you like examples. For instance, this little open sidebar is what we're going to build here. A little pocket sidebar that just comes in and out on click. That'll be one of the examples we build today. We're also going to do a little modal. So a custom full screen modal here that just opens and then closes either on the X or just on the background here. And then a little scroll up indicator. So this little subscribe box that people like to put on their website, you might have seen those on a bunch of websites. So again, we're going to build those three like we typically do. We will get to questions and comments and feedback from the crowd. If you have any other thoughts, I want to show you like this same little sidebar here, this same simple little sidebar can get a lot more complicated, right? So I have another version of it here where you could have like a tab list element, and it's a real nice looking guy you can have on the side here. And these are all clonables if you go to my page on the in the Webflow showcase. So some of these things are useful for some of that. But I think without any further ado, we should jump in. Joe, any thoughts on interactions and like how people should kind of think or approach this as they get started?
Well, even if you know how to build these interactions, you may learn something new in this episode. There's a lot of ways to organize your interactions. I believe Rymar has a very cool global close button that handles multiple interactions. So you can really be a lot more or less efficient in your interactions project. Yeah. So they're simple interactions, but I think very well made. So I'm hoping we have some learners here.
Well, and they're the basics for like a lot of other stuff to do, right? Because I'm going to show you how like this is a section that's kind of built in client first. And if we look inside of here, how this is built, this is template number, I don't know. This is, let's go to the client first site and see, can you pull that up, Joe, and see what template number this is? So in case people want to look at it, but let's look at just the structure here. Obviously we got the main wrapper. We're not going to build these elements. So we're not going to build this sidebar or these elements. We're just going to assume those are built because you can design these to do whatever you want. And they're very simple. These are just, as you see and look at any of these, it's just very few components inside of any of them, right? Text block, a form block, and then we have what we're calling a closed trigger, right? A closed trigger wrap. And so you'll see inside of there, there's just a piece of text. That's just a plus button turned at 45-degree angle. So that's how I build my little close buttons. There's lots of way to do these. But that seems to be easy enough for me. And so what I've done is I've duplicated this exact same project here with none of the interactions. So if we go onto this side, we can see on this element here, we see the little lightning bolt, and that indicates there's an interaction.
I don't think you're sharing.
Oh, we're not sharing the screen. That makes sense. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's go to the big size.
Nice.
Okay. So, okay, so let's go back through that. Let's just look at the section here. We have two examples. So I've got the exact same site in two different windows here. One of them has interactions, and the other one I've removed all the interactions from. Sections home process. Oh, that's from the template. So that's not one of the ones we're going to build. So anytime you see this little lightning bolt, right? What does that indicates that we have an interaction. And so over here in the top right corner, we see we have our interactions panel. So I can see that on my full screen modal component, it's telling me that it's hidden typically and that there's an interaction on it, right? And so if I click here, I'll see what that interaction is. And these are the ones we're going to build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this site now that doesn't have these interactions. I'm actually going to, let's see, my scroll trigger component. We're going to make that thing visible so that it's on the page, and I'll show you how to, again, design it. And we can go through this. This is just literally a wrapper. And if we looked at the position, it's position fixed to the bottom right corner. So you could define this however you want. You could do whatever you want with this. This is just saying that this little element is going to be fixed to the bottom right of the page. Again, we're not going to go over how to build this stuff. We're just going to go over the interactions. Sidebar section wrap. So I'm going to just pull this out of here, and then I'm going to move this above. And I'm just going to show you, like, if we go into this template and we didn't have this scroll trigger component, I'm going to hide that again just for 1 second. So this is how the template started, right? I came here, and the template has these sections. So there's this home section, home header, but I want to put a sidebar on the side of this. And to do that, I need another div inside of here. So again, that's where I put my, where is it? Okay, sidebar section wrap. So I had this sidebar component that's off the page, and I'm going to hide this one again now that I know where everything is. Where's my little scroll trigger container? Let's hide that. Okay, so I have my section, right? Sidebar section wrap. This is the section that I'm going to drop my section into. And this is because on this section here, I'm going to set flex. And this allows me to add that sidebar that I created, this sidebar component that's already built here, into the side of that section. So what we have here is we have a main wrapper, and then our section header and our sidebar component, and they're just flex. They're literally just flex right next to it. So if I get rid of this sidebar, if I hide it, you see that section now is going to take over that full area because I've got it to expand as a flex container. So hopefully that's making sense for folks. This is just a full width section in this template that I've put inside of a container, a wrapper, another section wrapper that now has flex on it so that these section header and the sidebar are side by side when it's visible. And so our interaction is essentially just going to do this. It's turning it on and turning it off, right? We're going to build an interaction that just does that. So let's go ahead and start with that. I'm going to leave it actually visible because I like to leave the elements visible when I start building this stuff. Joe, anything unclear so far? Anything that we need to maybe explain a little bit here?
Can you zoom in a bit more so we can see the class names and the styles a bit more clear? Yeah, that looks nice.
Yeah, that's probably about all I can do on this size monitor here. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, so I've also renamed these buttons. If you look at the regular template, you know, I've renamed these buttons. I think at some point these were like a video template or whatever. So, all right. So I'm going to grab my button and I'm going to create an interaction. So I want this element to trigger the sidebar opening and closing. Okay. So I'm going to trigger my element, and then I'm going to go over to my interactions panel. And this is where I tell it, hey, an element trigger, right? When I click on this button secondary, I want on tap, on click to start an interaction, right? And I'm going to create a new interaction. Here is where you could have some of those pre-built ones, but I don't want to apply an interaction to that button. I want that button to trigger this sidebar to open or close. So I'm going to start an animation, and I'm going to call the animation open sidebar. All right. And so what did we say we want this sidebar animation to do? We want it to open and close the sidebar. So I'm going to, oh no, don't do that. Don't go back. Okay. So I want this sidebar component to have an action. So I'm going to select this element, right? My trigger I selected to create the interaction. And on this sidebar now, I'm going to go ahead and apply a couple things. The first thing I'm going to do is create the initial state. So the initial state is what I want this thing to do when the page loads without anything having happened to this page. Here's what I'm going to do first. So the first thing I want to do, we want to like set a hide show state for that. And I'm going to hide that element, right? So the first step of that, and then I'm going to mark this as the initial state of that interaction. And then still on that same sidebar component. Yeah.
And Reimar, we're going to need a little bit of an adjustment with this screen share as the Finsweet logo is right where that sweet spot is.
Yeah, let me go ahead and just turn that off. Good call. Okay.
Nice.
Okay. So there we go. Okay, so I've just basically told this to hide show as the first step, right? If I delete this, where'd it go? That's weird. It should show it. Save. Okay, let's start over. So open sidebar. My first action is going to be to take that sidebar itself and hide it. Because my initial state, I don't want people to see that sidebar. I only want that sidebar to show up when it opens. But if I just set this to hide, and then let's say I set the next one, let's say I duplicate this here, Oh, I have to set the pace. So, okay, so let me set that to hide. And then here I want it to show. You know, so if I just play this interaction and I set this as the initial state, right? My first one I want to set as the initial state. And what's setting it as the initial state just tells it, hey, when this page is loaded or before this interaction starts, I want that sidebar to be hidden, right? So we're using the hide show property there and it's set to hidden. And then the next step of the interaction is to show it. You know, so this is just going to be a very jerky interaction here if I just open and close it, right? So we could literally go watch this right now. And if I click it, it'll show up, but it's kind of like just pops open there. So maybe we want to smooth that out. So I'm going to come back here to my hide show and the specific element, my sidebar component. I'm going to add a couple things to it. Let's add a little bit of movement to it. And we're going to move this guy, I think, let's go 100%. And I think that should get rid of it for us. And then I'm going to also add an opacity. So I'm going to add a slight opacity. I'm going to turn this opacity all the way down to 0. And then what I'm going to do is duplicate these two that I just created and bring them down and bring them onto my second phase. And so what I'm doing here is there's a little timeline, right? And so these top three, what you'll see is they all have set as initial state because these three states are going to be what Webflow, what the interaction starts at. And then this next step is basically going to take those one by one and show them. But what you'll see is my opacity is still set to 0. So on this second state, I want to make sure the opacity comes up to 100. And the sidebar, I want this to make sure it moves back to 0. Right? So now if I come back here and I play this, we're going to see that there's going to be just a subtle little, you know, a subtle little movement to that. And you can play with as much as you want, right? So we could come in here and maybe the hide show doesn't have any, but maybe your move, you want to set a little easing to it or something like that, right? Maybe you want a little bit of, I don't know, let's just ease in just a little bit. And I like to actually shorten this just a hair so that it looks and feels a little more responsive. So now when we click that, you're going to get that smooth little swipe. And then you can just adjust and modify this as much as possible, but now we can't close this sidebar, right? So now we can get it to open, but how do we get it to close, right? So the button now triggers the open. We got to create another interaction that basically replicates this that allows it to close, and we want the trigger for that to be this close button. So let's just save this interaction, and now we have an open sidebar interaction. Let's grab the element that we want to close the button, and we're going to do the same thing with an element trigger here. We're going to create a new one on click, and we're going to select the interaction. Here's where I'm going to show you a couple hacks, like a couple cheat modes on this, because creating the close interaction is like it doesn't take any time at all, right? So we'll start the animation. I'm actually going to duplicate my open sidebar interaction here, and I'll select that, and then when I come up here, I'll call it close sidebar. And then remember we set these as the initial state. So all we have to do is come and delete these three at the bottom, take these and deselect the set as initial state. And what this is going to do now is just literally going to undo that first interaction that you built. So if open sidebar had that initial state and then it slides out, the closed sidebar is literally just reverting back to its initial state. But I've told Webflow not to store it as its initial state because that'll break the interaction. So literally right there, you just delete those bottom ones. And now if we come out here and we click open sidebar, boom, our sidebar opens. And if we click on this guy, it closes, right? And so you could open and close. Now there may be other ways. Maybe you don't want the close button to be here and you want this on the second, let's close this. Maybe you want this button to on the second click, right? So right now it's saying on first click, open the sidebar. But maybe I want it also on second click to start an animation and close the sidebar. So now if I come back here, instead of having my X to close, I could open and close it with this button. However, this creates a problem, and this is one of those things that you got to think about when you're building interactions. If I have a second trigger on here, and then I come and use this close button, when I go to click the button again, now I have to click it twice to actually get the sidebar to open. So that's just one of those caveats when you like build interactions. A lot of times you want to have just one interaction to open, one interaction to close, because you can find yourself in like weird loops. Joe, any thoughts or experience on that? Oh, I think you're muted, Joe. I don't hear your audio.
That is correct. I was muted. It's something you definitely have to be careful about. It can really confuse you about why something's working. Mm-hmm. Make sure that there's one source of truth for open and close. and it can't be a mix of the first and second click with a different element on first click.
Right.
So yeah, understand that. If you have questions about that, ask in the chat. We will answer any questions about that workflow if you have them. And we have a question from Urban Pixel. What about mobile? So Reimar, what are we doing with mobile on this? How does that work?
So I actually, I have not like broken this down on a responsive, but what I would probably do is, let's see if we can just do this real quick, right? So my sidebar component here, let's see what my dimensions are set to this. I think I have a width cap. I might do like 100 VW here. And then, let's see, where's my fixed? Where's my positioning? Oh, where's my positioning on this? Why did it go to relative on, maybe I would do this. Let's call it like absolute or maybe fixed, and then bring it up in Z index. Yeah, I would have to spend some time. I actually didn't, I didn't plan on going all the way to mobile on this. But what I would do is I would literally just bring it closed, and I would bring this sidebar component. And I'm wondering why it lost its color, or why it's not. Like, let me just see how, if I can bring this all the way to the top. Yeah, this might have some child Z index that I would have to play with here. But essentially it would be the same thing, and it would just open up over top of this, and then the X would be here to close it. So the X actually is here to close it. So if I could open the sidebar, you see it come over, and the X is still there. I'm just wondering why the background of this sidebar component just disappeared. Let me see.
Have you applied that to a parent?
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Nice.
Okay, so open sidebar and close sidebar. You know, so your site is still there. Oh, and actually, what I did, I got to go back and take that second interaction off of this. So let me go here, and I take that. Let me take that second click off. So on second click, I don't want it to do anything. On second click, I don't want it to do anything because I want the X to close the sidebar here. So I'll open the sidebar, and then it closes. If I go down to the mobile, same thing. I can open the sidebar, and then it closes. And if I wanted that to stretch full width, if I wanted this element to stretch full width, you could obviously just have it cover the whole screen here. You may not want to do that because you see how it pops up at the top. And so then you got to like add, you know, whatever 60 pixel margin, or I guess that would be whatever it is. Oh, shit. Whatever it is in REMs. So I wouldn't, you know, you just got to, like, we're not going to go through the design here, but there's a million ways that you could redesign this. But you can see there literally a couple clips. You open the sidebar and you still have the sidebar on mobile. Everything's responsive. So as long as you build those elements responsive, that should not be a problem with jumping back and forth between those things. Any other questions related to that? I'm seeing.
We have a question from Daniel. So how do you avoid the open second tap close clash with two buttons? So Daniel, I think you can break this down into a really simple rule. If you have an element that has first click and second click, there can't be another button that does the same thing. If you do the first click and second click, that can be the only trigger for this action. You cannot apply the open and or the close to something else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And Reimar, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I got into this I got into a lot of problems when I started playing with interactions where I would try to do like one button to do it all because I wanted multiple buttons. Like in this one, for instance, let me come to this, right? So right here, I have multiple buttons trigger this in and out, right? So this button triggers out and you see the icon flips, and then this triggers in, but then they're separate, right? So that's a single, that's a double click, one click, two click. But now here, show sidebar and then hide sidebar. So those are separate clicks. And you can see that at the end, it reverses it there. And so you can solve this. It just becomes a little more complicated because you have to think about like hiding or replacing items, or you have to think about, am I doing an interaction to a state or a class? And honestly, I can't remember how I exactly solved it here, but you can do that and have multiple triggers. I just will tell you that this, you know, the one that I'm sharing right now, this, you know, showing and hiding here, is a lot more complex than the one we just built because exactly that, because it has one trigger that has a 2-click trigger on it, and then these individually also work. And right, so it's trying to open, it's not going to open because it's just the hide sidebar. So I think that's a little deeper than we can go into today, but you just have to understand if it's going to be the same element, that second click could sometimes create a ghost click. And so
Always.
yeah, you can find funky ways to like hide show certain elements or replace the button and make it kind of look like it's the same. But yeah, that's a tough thing, and I would recommend. It's just a lot of experimentation to get into that.
And I would also recommend to not do that.
Yeah,
Like what we set up here is so simple
yep,
and so easy and so manageable that you should be doing this. There
yeah,
shouldn't be hacky ways to show and hide things and create a fake layer on top that acts as the whatever.
right.
It's all possible, but keep it simple. If
Yeah,
you can keep it simple, you got to do it.
yeah, and again, that's one of those things that I played at the beginning, and I was like, let's get crazy, and you could just you start doing stuff just because you can, and then you realize no, it's easier to just have one button that opens, one button that closes, and like that's how I would handle it, even on the modal. So the next one we're gonna see is the modal, building this little modal. So now let's go up here. I have this element. Where is my modal? Full screen modal component. Again, I have this hidden, but now I want to show it, right? And the reason I have this hidden is because this modal will just take over my full screen and I wouldn't be able to edit anything behind it. If we look at the Z index, I have this thing just to go above everything potentially ever, right? So literally, I think it's like 99,999. Just to make sure that anybody who comes in here later and builds something, or anybody who touches something, like this modal needs to be on top of everything theoretically on the page. And when we look inside of here, it's literally just a couple things. We'll see the same closed trigger wrap that I have before. And actually, that reminds me, I'll have to go fix something on that original interaction. And then I have my full screen modal content, which is literally just a heading centered inside of I think this is the Flexbox center. So not a lot of styling here. The goal here is not to show you how to design a beautiful modal. It's how to build something that can be interactive. So let me go back real quick before I forget, before I start on this. Where is my, let me hide this. I got to come back here to my X. Go ahead, Joe.
Do you want to work a little bit while I give some helpers and attributes? Or are you ready to continue?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to remove this. I wanted to change something, and I wanted people to like specifically understand why I'm going to make this change here on this X. Because this close trigger wrap, you'll see like, and Joe was saying, hey, this doesn't file client first because inside of my sidebar component, I have something that's called a closed trigger wrap. But if you look inside of this full screen modal component, I also have a closed trigger wrap, right? And so I just created a closed trigger wrap, and basically that closed trigger wrap is this box here. And if we look at the settings on this, I think it's literally just rotating 45 degrees with a plus button inside of it, right? So that's a real simple way to create an X. You can get, again, you can put lotties in here. You can create all sorts of crazy stuff, but this is just going to be very, very simple here. And so I use that same trigger to close this, to close the modal, and to close this little sidebar. But what I did when I set up this first interaction that I didn't think about was that I came in here to this closed sidebar. And if we look here, these elements, like sidebar component, oh no, it's the class itself. It's the interaction itself. It needs to be on the element. Okay, it's set right. Okay, element. What I wanted to make sure is this wasn't affecting the whole class, right? If you set an interaction and instead of it being on the element down here, it's set for the whole class, anytime this class shows up, it's going to close that sidebar, right? So that could create some confusion. So I was just coming to make sure that this close button here was only set to be this specific element, so that when I go to open up my full screen modal here, and I bring this back to visible, I can use the same element up here. So if we look, I have a closed trigger wrap up here, and we're going to build this interaction. So let's hide this. This is the trigger we're going to use to trigger that. So again, we're going to come up here. We're going to start a new interaction, and on tap again, we're going to start an animation, but we're going to build a new one because none of these are our open modal. So we're going to come here. Open modal is what we'll call this. Okay. So now that I selected my element and my trigger, I'll come up to that full screen modal component, which is what I hid. And here again, I'm going to hide show, and I'm going to make sure that my initial state is hidden, right? I want to make sure that that modal starts at a hidden state. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I don't just want the hide, close, and the show as the interaction here. You could do that, but it just creates kind of a jerky interaction. So again, I'm going to add a scale this time instead of a move, and I'm going to set that scale to 0. both on the vertical and horizontal axis. And then I'm also going to add a opacity, and I'm going to take that to 0. And again, I'm going to make sure that all 3 of these get set as my initial state here. And then I'm just going to duplicate them, right? And so now I'm going to do the opposite. So my hide show, I want this thing to show up as flex. When I scale it, I want it to scale up to 1 on the vertical and the horizontal axis. And on the opacity, I want to make sure we get back to 100. And again, you can play with the easing, you can do whatever you want, but in those 3 steps right there, we just created a modal that pops open, right? And so maybe that's a little slow for you, right? So I'm going to take the scaling, and right now it's at like half a second. I'm going to set that to 0.3 of a second. And same thing with the opacity. Maybe I want the opacity actually to be half a second, so it's a slight delay there. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, great. And actually, maybe I want to go one step further with this. Actually, let's take this one step further here. So we're here. Let's take this inner block, right? So I just clicked on that inner block, and when you click on an element, we're going to put this in here, and I'm going to put this, I'm going to move. Where's my move? Okay, I'm going to move this. I'm going to maybe like move this down. Let's call it like 2 rounds, because we don't really want a lot, but 2 rounds. Okay, and then duplicate that here. And after the modal shows up, I want that basically that inner screen to kind of delay getting back to the middle here. And then I also want to, let's see, set the opacity for this. So let's grab the opacity, and we're going to go to 100% here as well. But I want to then duplicate this and make sure at the entry state it's 0. So watch what happens. Now we're going to have the modal open, and then that little inner area is going to come up right behind it. You're going to see it little just kind of lift up at the end there. Boom. Right? So you can just add a second little stage to that. And maybe again, that's a little too slow for me. So maybe I want that to happen a little bit faster. And so I just changed the timing of the interaction there, and bang, I got a nice little 2-stage interactive modal. Joe, any questions coming in on any of this stuff? Is any of that sticking with folks? I'm not able to obviously read the comments here as I'm going through. So
we have a couple comments, but they're not directly related to what you're doing now. So you can keep going. Okay. And I have the questions after we're done with this example.
Great. So now let's take a look at the live site, right? So now we have our sidebar that can open and close, and maybe there's a video or some kind of interactive element that I want to show up here. It's so cool. Now we got this, but our X doesn't close it. You know, our X doesn't close it, the background doesn't close it, nothing closes it because we just set the open interaction. So remember, we're going to save that. And remember, our close interaction is just as easy. So I'm going to go to my full screen modal component, click my close trigger wrap here, and I don't need to see it because I kind of know where those elements are. I'm just going to pick this close trigger wrap, and I'll start a new interaction. On tap, I want to select an animation, start an animation. And again, I have my open modal already built, so I'm just going to duplicate that. There's no reason to go in here and recreate all this and try to figure out what you did in the first time to try to recreate it. So we come into open modal, we're going to close modal, and then I'm just going to get rid of everything that's behind here and revert this to not the initial state, right? So I'm taking all of those things off of the initial state, and that should be it. I should be able to now open my modal and come to my X, and it's just going to disappear. And every time it's just going to refresh that all back to its initial state. And that's it. It's literally simple as that. And you can get as complicated as you want here, right? So even if I, like, let's say I take this full screen modal component, and because I set it to scale, I don't know if I want to readjust that. You can change the side it scales it. So let's say you want it to scale from the right, right? So you can pin that using right down here on your transforms, right? You can pick where this scales from. Right now it's scaling from the center, and that's why when we open this, you're seeing the modal kind of come out from the middle. But if I were to move this same element on this transform and say, let's open from the side, you're going to see it scale from that right side when I open this modal. You know, and so this is where you can get into, again, nice little side swipes, nice little, you know, whatever little ditties you want to add to this. But again, just showing you how you can create a real simple interaction, and then in a couple steps, reverse that interaction without a lot of work, right? So 2 real simple interactions there that should be super easy for anyone to build. Any questions coming in on any of that interaction stuff?
Not specific to this. example the setup
Okay.
that you made.
Do we want to
But
take
there
some
is
other
one,
questions about other things? Yeah,
yeah,
let's jump in.
there is one related to modals.
Okay.
Ivan asks, will we see an attribute that will disable page scroll when modals are open?
Mm.
And yes, Ivan, we will see this, and we will see it in about 5 seconds when I share it in the chat here. We
Nice.
already have this. It works. It's super clean. There's a lot of customization, and this is ready to go for you. And since we are in attributes, I'll add another attribute that's really useful for modals. Both of these solutions fit right on top of what Rymar just did right now. And for a lot of implementations, it can really take that lightbox to the next level. You know, the difference between a jumping screen or a different layout because your lightbox is not optimized. The next optimization is smart lightbox. This one is really, really powerful. What it's going to do is take your modal and put it as the outermost parent of the page. So that way you won't have any z-index problems.
Mm.
You know, if you have a modal that's nested inside of something with a z-index, it's going to inherit that z-index, and you can't break past that parent z-index.
Yeah.
This solution is going to break past that parent. So I can have nested, 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 nested modal, even inside of a collection list. And when that opens, that is going to temporarily move to the outermost parent, show as a modal, full z-index power. And then when you close it, it's going to magically go back to where we took it from.
That's so good.
So both of it's really good.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times as a beginner I did not know that issue. And I was so confused. This is z-index 9999999. What else is a higher z-index? But that parent z-index, it will destroy you. And sometimes you just don't have a choice in Webflow.
Yep.
Like if you're in a CMS list, you need to break past that. So check both of those out. Even if you're a beginner, those are advanced features, but we've made implementation beginner level. Really nice.
Nice. Pavish is asking, can we make a line scroll on mouse scroll? Yeah, let me get one more second to go through the last one that I have planned, and then I'm happy to take like some other stuff that we can maybe like play with and figure out if we can show how to do that. I haven't set up for those, so let me go through the last one that I actually set up for here, and we can show you, because a lot of people like those scroll into view interactions. You know, like you see this a lot for, you know, like email subscribe, where when I get down past a certain point on the page, oh, that's right, I turned. Go ahead.
Can we answer one question from Omkar before we move on?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Omkar asks if we're adding interactions to classes and using it in more than one places as a combo class, for example, text reveal, loading, etc. Is it a good practice from client first perspective? So yes, Omkar, that is a good practice if you are using it correctly. So this is really similar to what Rymar was just showing with this kind of global close state, this global close class. And you could even have a setup where that's closing multiple things in the project, all different types of elements, modals, sliders, newsletter. You can make them all be controlled by one class. So yeah, it's good practice, but you also have to be doing it correctly. Your real key here is to make sure that you are not making it more difficult, and you're actually making it less difficult to build it, to manage it, and for the next person. If you're doing those things, it's client first.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I could have named the wrapper, like it could be like the modal wrapper and the sidebar background and all of them. I could have created them globally. Like if I was going to do a bunch of modals, I would name the container of all those modals the same thing, so that I could use one click trigger to, no matter which modal I was opening, I would just have to put that click trigger and it would shut those things down. So no matter what modal opened, I'd have different buttons to open up a bunch of different modals. So I might have like 4 or 5 different open interactions, and one might be triggered by a button, one's triggered by something else over here, one maybe comes up on scroll, but then I could use the same close button to close them all, because that would be a class-based interaction that could attack that same parent. So this all has to do with how you name them and how you build, and you'll become more comfortable with that as you get more advanced at doing some interactions. So yeah, Richard Doe is actually asking here too. Does Finsweet have any plans for a global interactions library? Find myself repeating a lot of similar animations in every new project. Yeah, that's tough.
No, we're not. If you're talking about integrating with Webflow interactions, we have no plans there. It's very difficult to integrate with. It was not built to integrate with. So no, not integrating with those. We're also not really looking to integrate with other libraries and make those available for you.
Yeah.
So no, we're not really doing that, Richard.
Well, and Fernando's asking here, for me, the big goal is making components with interactions. So for example, use them as symbols.
Yeah.
This works. You can do this. If you have an interaction and it lives inside the symbol, when you move that symbol or put the symbol around, like that interaction comes with it. I've built stuff like that. You can get into problems where, again, what Joe was saying, if you have z-index problems, or if then you need to change something inside of there that isn't attached to the symbol, like it could create other hurdles for you. But you can, like for instance, in a nav, right? We could put this open modal, like if I came over here and I grabbed this full screen modal component and dropped it into the nav bar, and I, instead of this clone project, I changed it to this open modal button, like every page on the site would open that modal if I clicked the clone project button, right? So I don't want to go through that example just for complexity, but literally you could just drop this element into your symbol here, rename, re-trigger one of these buttons or menu items to be, the open trigger button. And now anywhere on this, where the symbol appears, that modal would open at that click. So that is a good way to get interactions across different places on your site. Any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, it's possible to use them globally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You just have to be careful with it.
Yeah,
you have to know how they work really well.
And I do believe Webflow's working on some interaction reusability stuff, and I have heard, I don't know when, right? But this is their second iteration of interactions, and I've heard about an interactions refresh kind of thing. So who knows what they have planned. It would be great to see. I know like some of the page-based ones where you have to go page by page and add it, even though it's like a page-based, it's like, those would be cool if I could like apply one interaction and say apply to all pages kind of thing. Like that kind of stuff would be cool to see in Webflow. I know you can't see the screen. We're just chatting about questions right now. So let's go back into that screen view and let's get back into this last little example. Just hang on, we're coming back. It's back. You'll see if anybody stayed. All right, it looks like we're back on the internet, back on the grind here. Yeah,
I'm not seeing any screen.
It's going. You're not seeing. Let me turn on the virtual camera here so you can see what's happening there. Okay, so it looks like we're back. We honestly, this is the most frustrating thing I've ever experienced in my life. We've bought equipment, we've split the stream up. This is not something that like we can replicate reliably when we're troubleshooting. It literally just like sometimes it works perfect and sometimes this happens. And so trust me, this is as frustrating for us as it is for you to not be able to figure this stuff out. But yeah, hopefully soon. We will find a resolution. Okay, so let's just, for the sake of it, let's finish up this last. Let's see, 15K to stop the buzz. People, subscribe if you haven't. There you go. Okay, well, let's just finish this last example because it's prepped and ready here, and it's another super simple one. So again, we have this little scroll trigger content here. We're going to go into our example and let's see what that's going to do. So as I scroll down the page, and I have it essentially set that once this element comes into view, this little guy pops up here. And so let's go look at that. And I think, let's see, which one did I set this for? I think it's this section home process, I think has the show corner call to action. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So coming into my setup here, we're gonna look at our elements, and let's close some of these so that I can see where I'm at. And section home process. Oh, it has, okay, it does have the scroll interaction, but I deleted the actual interaction itself. So, okay, so that's what we would do. Let's just delete that. Our section home process. So basically this is what I want to have happen. Here's what we're going to have happen. When I'm scrolling down the page, when I get to this section here, right, this section home process, when that thing appears in the viewport, I want that call to action that right now is hidden. Right, scroll trigger component. Let's scroll trigger content. Let's make that visible here. So let's just, oh no, I need a block. Let's just make that visible here. And so when I hit this, not project, it was home process. So when I hit this element, so I'm going to go and put an interaction because this is my trigger. This is the element that I want to trigger the interaction. Right, so I'm going to go section home process. I'm going to create an interaction, and I want again another element trigger. I want when this element scrolls into view. Now you may see on the side here that some of these have a little loop and arrows around it. That indicates that this is a continuous interaction, right? So mouse move over element versus mouse hover. Mouse hover is when I hover over a specific element. Mouse move over element is going to be a continuous interaction. So it gives me different options. So you have to understand that anytime you see this, and you'll see the same thing on the page trigger side. So if I go to the page triggers and I click add here, you'll see that mouse move over viewport. This is going to be when my mouse is moving all over the entire viewport. Where in the page is scrolling, this is going to be scrolling up or down. So what I want is when this specific element comes into view, right? Not while scrolling into view, because this would then give me a timeline and it would be up and down, like it would react on the up and down. But I just want when this element scrolls into view, I want to create a new interaction. So I'm going to start the interaction, and I'm going to call that show call to action. Okay. And so again, I'm just going to grab our scroll trigger content here, and I'm going to set the initial state. We want that thing to hide, just like we've done with the other ones. Then we want in that same initial state, we maybe want the opacity to go down to 0 because we want that to fade up to 100% when we bring it up. And then
can we take the Finsweet logo out again?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
We're blocking those values.
Yep, sorry. Okay, so let's just undo all that. So as we come
and a zoom in if you can.
And we got this. Boom, zoom in. Okay. So again, scroll trigger, when this element here comes into view, section home process. When this comes into view, I'm going to do an interaction that basically scrolls into view here, right? So I've come in and I've created a show call to action interaction, and then I'm going to grab that element, right? So my scroll trigger content is what I want to have an action take place to. So I'm going to hide show, set the initial state, right? Because at the beginning, I want this to be hidden. So I'm going to hide that element. I don't want it to be seen on the page. I also want to add 0 opacity because I want it to fade up. And then I'm going to move it. I want it to move down. Let's say, no, it's this way. I forget what I made that, but let's go 100% again and see what that does. Okay. So now I have those 3. I'm going to duplicate them down here. And then I'm just going to reverse what I just did. I want it to show up as an inline block. I want the opacity to come back up to 100%. And then I want my move interaction to happen. I want to set this back to 0. And so now if I come back here and I play this guy, that's what you're going to get. But it's not going to happen on a click. It's going to happen again when that section scrolls into view. So as you see there, when I was already here, right? So when I open, because that section's in view, it's going to trigger the interaction. So what I need to do if I really want to see how it's going to interact, I got to scroll up to the top of the page and then come down, and then I can pick, oh, there it is. Very nice, right? But I can't close this now. Remember, I don't have a close interaction set for this yet. So what do we do on the close interaction? Again, it's super simple. We got to get to a point where we can see this guy. Oh, let's actually save this and close this out. So we're going to grab our close trigger, and we're going to make sure that's the right element. So close trigger wrap is what we want. And we're going to add another on tap interaction. And we're going to do the same thing we've done before. Starting interaction, we've got our show call to action. We're going to duplicate this. and we're going to say hide CTA. Boom. And again, we're just going to delete our second state and remove the initial state from the first three. And now, if we scroll up a little bit, when we come down, this thing will pop up, and now our X will close it. And what that'll also do is if I scroll back up and down, it won't come back. You know, it will not come back until this page is refreshed. You don't have to worry about setting a cookie. You don't have to worry about anything fancy. Literally, as soon as that page is reloaded, that interaction will reload. But because I didn't tell it to do anything else, I didn't tell it to come back on a scroll, and there's no first interaction that triggers that thing to come back up, you don't need to worry about setting a cookie so this only shows up once. You may still want to set a cookie so that every time I scroll up and down this page, it doesn't trigger that same interaction. But that's just a simple way to do that. And then there's a lot of things you can kind of play with in this setting. So if I save this inside of here, maybe not. Where's the offset? I thought I could change the offset on this one, but maybe it's not. Am I sleeping on that? Oh, that's the hide call to action. So I need the other one. Where's my element here? So section home, show call to action, scrolling into view. Let's see. Where am I? Am I dreaming here? I thought I had the ability to kind of modify. Maybe it's not on this one. Maybe I'm mistaking the continuous one where you can kind of set like if it's 50% or 100%. I really thought there was like, but I may be dreaming.
And you're not talking about the offset input right under when you click into that, right under the action?
No, I'm not talking.
You're talking about the visual one.
Yeah, and I think it may be when it's the continuous scroll. I think it's like the while scrolling into view is what I'm thinking of. So let me just, yeah. This is what I was thinking. It's that you can then set, percentages, and you can set and control that a little deeper. So I was mistaken there. It's not. It's not available on the scroll into view. It's available on the when scrolling into view. But there you go. I mean, 3 super simple interactions that I think play on almost any site, and you can get as complicated as you want with some of this stuff, right? You can get as complicated as you want with the design here, with these different elements, with what you want in this call to action. So hopefully those were 3 little tips on adding interactions inside of here that brought a little value. Again, I think YouTube slices out all the dead air, so the people who watch this in the future won't have the break. But okay, yeah. Any questions coming in? Anything that we need to go through here?
We have a question from Jeff, a good one. Why add the high show action if you also animate the opacity and scale to make it invisible? Jeff, this is a nice one. You may not apply any hide state, and it will be no difference to the user at all. Nobody's ever going to know this. I like to think that it's good practice. Sometimes it actually matters. Sometimes it actually doesn't matter. But as a good practice, I like to do this at all times, because if we don't need to see the image, let's display none it, right? If it's not on the page, we want to make sure that it's as much off the page as possible. And that really comes with a display none versus display block. So yeah, I think just good practice overall. And there are some cases where you actually need to do this.
Yeah.
For example, let's say we didn't do that move state that moves it out of the way and it was just opacity. We're going to want to make that display none so the user can't accidentally click on it. Reimar, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is that sometimes you just want, I want these elements on the page, so I design them, and I don't want to always have to go in here and hide this to get it out of the way, or maybe I want it while I'm building. I just, and so sometimes what I'll do is, and vice versa, sometimes I want this to be gone, right? So when I'm working in the designer, I don't want those to be there. And so what I'll do is, just in case I forget while I'm building, and let's say I didn't set that hide state and I leave this here, then I'm going to see a flash, when I go to load that page, because I forgot to leave the initial state as hidden. So I want to make sure the interaction does that for me, and so that's why I get into the habit of putting that hide show on the interaction at the beginning. You don't have to, it depends on the interaction, but it's, like Joe said, it's kind of one of those things that's just good practice.
And Maria adds, it could also block elements that could be clicked.
Yes.
So it may not be obvious that it's blocking an element, but it may be blocking an element. So for all these reasons, for everything we've explained, it's just good practice.
Yeah.
That's the sum of all of these answers.
Yeah. Okay. So is there any?
We have one from Robert. What will this interaction look like on mobile? So we had a similar question earlier with the what does it look like on mobile? It's going to be the same thing here. We're probably going to have to apply some style
Nope,
updates.
you don't even have to style anything. I'm telling you.
That looks great.
Because we're
There you
G's.
go.
Because I did it responsive from the get-go. Because, you know, we're
Nice.
using percentages and it's all like, so if you're doing this stuff right, like literally we opened that sidebar and all we changed on this element was we made it fixed. And we changed the background color on mobile. But if you remember at the beginning, like there wasn't a lot that we did to make this mobile responsive. Same thing with this modal. This one might change because this was not set up to be responsive. But then again, I would just come in here and play with my padding and my margin and do whatever I need to get that modal to be responsive. But as you can see, it does fill my full screen here. And the X still opens and closes it. So all this stuff is super easy to break down then and go to mobile. And then if you come here, you know, this is exactly how you would expect it to behave, right? And you've just got everything you need here. And then again, you can close it. So if you're doing this stuff right from the get-go and building those components properly, like moving this stuff to responsive should be a breeze.
Nice. I think that's it for the questions. Did we miss anybody's question? Does anybody have any final questions?
There was one. I wonder if this person's still there about the scrolling thing. I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if I'm trying to think if there's any element on here that I could just kind of cheat that with and do some kind of like maybe this. It may not be perfect. I'm wondering if we could just hacky something to this.
A growing line?
I thought he said something about like scrolling, like text scrolling or something like that.
Oh, I thought it was a scrolling line from Pavish.
Oh, a scrolling line, like a scroll depth indicator?
Yeah. I think that's kind of what the ask was, that a line is growing on scroll.
Okay, so that could be pretty simple. Let's just here in my, let's see, we're going to put that under the nav bar. Let's see.
He's here. That's great.
Is that what he's, is it possible? Can you make, Pavish, crawl line on scroll. I don't know if what you mean there is you want the text crawling while you're scrolling or if you want a scroll indicator, but I'm going to show you how to build a real quick scroll indicator. Super, super easy. So Command E div, we're going to just drop a div in here. And let's see, where did that end up? Full screen mode. I'm going to just drop it at the top of the page here. Actually, I'm even going to put it above the nav bar, but the nav bar might be sticky, so let's not do that. Where's my section? We'll do it just in the top of this section. Nope, it has to be above that. Okay. And then we're just going to call this, a scroll dash indicator. And we might want to like, I don't know, typically these things are like fixed in a certain place or they're connected to a certain thing, but let's just fix this to the top of the page just to make it real simple. And we're going to call this thing like what, 2rem just for, not width. We want that to be 100%. And then we want the height to be like 2rem. Maybe that's too much, maybe like half a rem. Okay. And now I'm going to give this a background. So, we'll give it this nice green background because that's going to be the look. And so there you have that little bar. And to do this, it's real simple. You take that little element, and what I'm actually going to do before I go into the interactions, I'm going to set my transform point to be on the left here because I want this thing to come from the left to the right as I go through. Scroll. Yeah, when you scroll, line up here. Okay, yep. So that's what we're doing right here. So I want, this transform origin, I want when this thing scrolls and expands to expand from the left side. Okay? So now that that's set and I have that little div up there, my scroll indicator div, now I just come up here and this is going to be a page trigger. So this is going to be while page is scrolling, right? You want this to continuously measure up and down the page. And when we click this, We're going to select an action, play scroll animation, and you can see there's no animations here. All those other animations were a different type of interaction. Those were click based, those were hover based, those were totally different ones. This now is going to give me a timeline. So I'm going to call this scroll depth indicator, right? And so here I'm still selected on my scroll indicator. Here I'm just going to click scale. And one thing I have to do is I have to unlock this because I want to put 1 as my vertical height because I want to make sure that that stays. And then on my horizontal, I'm going to go 0 here. And you see how that disappeared to the left there? And so now at 100% of the page scroll, I want to keep my vertical height at 1. I got to unlock these because if I don't, then they stay together. So 1. And then here I also want to come back to 1. Actually, in that case, I could have left them locked. And so let's take a look at this, like live preview. And now you see this thing just expands as you move across the page. And what happened is you can see the Z index. There's an element there with the higher Z index. So that's just something that you'd have to go in and mix. But when I get to the bottom of this page, bink, the full indicator should be there. Right? And so this is super simple to do, and you can get as complicated and intriguing as you want with this. Actually, there's a crawling lines when you scroll in page view. I'm not sure what you obviously, Pavish, have to use different words if you want us to do something different. You can't just keep saying the same thing and expect us to still understand. So yeah, if you could describe that a little better, we'll try to get more like it. But this line is crawling when scroll in page view. I'm sorry, that may not be what he wanted. But again, what did that take? Just a couple minutes, and then you can get as complicated as you want with this. Let me show you one. Actually, I did a cool. Let me see on one of these things that I built. This guy. Go ahead.
Fun fact: I've actually never seen it built like that before.
Oh, really?
I've never seen that implementation, that set of CSS properties for that effect.
Nice.
First time for me.
So this on the side here, if y'all can see these little green lines, it's going up and down. This is just a fancy version of what I just built. And it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in further. I don't know if it's going to do it, but just look on the edges of this little, it's literally the exact same indicator. So as I scroll, that thing's going to shrink, so as I get to the bottom of the page, that scroll indicator disappears. But I added a cool little loop that's scrolling one color back and forth, and that's what's giving this color shift. So that same little interaction that we just added here, that adjust on scroll, is the same. It's the same principle. You just get a little more complicated with it. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has. Let's see. Is there great reasons? Okay. Yeah, crawl line on scroll. When you scroll, line appear. Scrolling. Okay. I don't know. What else there may be there? Maybe it's text. I don't know if there's text or if there's other things that there's all sorts of interactions, but the basic principles are essentially the same there. So I think that might be it. I think that might be it for our interactions course. Any other questions out there? Feel free to leave them, and we'll maybe get back to them in the comments as we go, or in another episode. But I think that's all we got for our interactions live lesson today. Any other thoughts, Joe?
And I'll answer a question from Bello. Joe, what will it take for me to work/intern at Finsweet? I'm dying to work with you guys. Well, I guess you need to show us why you should. That's all. That's how I can answer that. If you think you should be working here, you should tell us why. And also know that we are not actively hiring outside of technical developers. We're looking for a few technical developers. Outside of that, we are not actively hiring. However, we're always looking to work with great people who are passionate and motivated and do want to work with us. So that's all I'll say to that. And Bello, thank you for coming to check out the stream.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, that was awesome. Thanks. Glad you liked it. Please do more client-first interaction demos. Yeah, I had done, I just don't know when we could find the time, but like, let me show this thing. At one point, I was building like a full-fledged course on interactions that took you through like lots of different things and all sorts of like little nuggets here of Oh yeah, you got to X out of that. And there's like, I don't know if we had a bunch of demand, you know, I don't know how we would gauge that, but things like this cool hovering out interactions, like this is always fun, you know. So you can create like real cool, crazy things in Webflow, and this is super simple. Like this interaction looks complex, and it may break somebody's computer if they have an old CPU or something. But there's so many cool things you can do in Webflow with interactions that just like this is another fun experiment where it's just completely playing around with just shapes and movement. And actually, let's refresh this page because this became a popular clonable just because of this conversation here, like this section. And it almost looks like a conversation with like a prompt to, you know, have a message. And so like, if you go into my webflow.com/Rymar, there's a ton of these clonables. Like this is how I got started in the game, was just playing and building all sorts of little things like this. And I would encourage everyone to just experiment. These may not be things you want to do in a production site, but learning how to create just wild off the wall shit will really give you a good advantage in Webflow. You know, like maybe this text here is some of what he was talking about, you know, where you got some kind of like scrolling as you go down the page. Lots of different things, you know. There's just Webflow will let you do as much as you want with interactions. It just comes down to, you know, what can you build, how much patience you have. I think really it just comes down to the patience, you know, most of the time. But yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of demand for this stuff, I could see doing more on the interactions. So
nice.
Yeah,
Great topic. And there's so much to cover, right? We just covered a little tiny piece of it, simple workflow improvements, but yeah, we have a lot of potential with this topic.
Yeah, and yeah, so let us know. Head over to finsweet.com/vote. You know, you can tell us what kind of content you'd like to see on the show. Yes, more interactions, please. Jeff is saying. Omkar is saying how to get early access for this course. Omkar, this is a course that I started and then abandoned ship when I came over to Finsweet. I thought at one point that I might still be able to do it in my like side time, but I just, it's a lot. It's a lot to create a course that's going to be as intricate as what I was trying to do there. So I don't know. It might be fun to come out. Just go cast your vote for that. Susan McPhee saying we demand. Nice. Can you show any text or image reveal effect while scrolling? Yeah, I can show you one. We won't build it, but I will show you a cool one that I built that was super popular here. Let me go to screen share again. Let's see. I think it's like a video reveal on scroll. I might have to go one more here. So open live site. Let's take a look at this. This is a cool background video element. And as you scroll, the video reveals itself and the text disappears. And then as you scroll, you can go into the next section. So there's all sorts of ways to do things like this. I'm trying to think if I have any, and these are all clonable examples. Super easy to build, right? Like let's open this in Webflow and I'll show you how literally it's super easy. And this was before client first and naming stuff, so don't judge me, okay? But there's just 4 divs here that are blocking, and I think these are set to absolute, cover the left, absolute, cover the, cover the left here. The other one was cover the right. This one's cover top, and I think I have it at 30 VH. So again, this may not be best practices from a build standpoint because I've learned so much since then. But then all we do is on page scroll or on section scroll. Let's see which one I did it. Video reveal trigger. So I have a trigger here, and I bet if I come over here, there's a while scrolling into view. So it's that same timeline, member video reveal. And what we can see is I have all my fat borders. And just like I set that scroll depth indicator to scale, these borders all have transform points either on the left, on the right, on the top, or the bottom, and they're just scaling, right? So it's scaling from 1, right, at the top to, if I go down to the bottom, to 0. Right, so this one, the fat border scales left and right, and literally it's just 4 of those little same scroll indicators that as you get through this section, it's just shrinking the left, right, top, and bottom border. and you can reveal that video. I'm not sure that's exactly what you're looking for, but again, it just goes to show how like simple it is to create stuff that looks a little more fancy than it is. This is another one, super simple on hover. Just fans the cards out. And these are like games. These are games to play with Webflow.
We have a question from Urban Pixel. How do you solve the white space at the bottom? After the video, when you're going to the other section, there's a lot of white space.
I actually did that on purpose. So if we look at this was just going to be the next section of the site. So I left that, right? So I have a video reveal trigger, which is a 100 VH section that just, is going to scroll through. It's like a blank ghost div. And then the idea is that your content starts in here. So this info section would just be your site. So as everything fades out, what you see as white space is just going to be the rest of the website. So whatever other elements you had there, whatever design elements, I might put like an opacity from 0 to 100. So like, for instance, if I just dropped a heading in here, let's say, and let's make this element, I won't save any of this stuff. I think this is read only anyway. So let's center this. And then what I'm going to do is let's go to this video reveal trigger. And I'm going to add something here. So on this reveal section, I'm going to grab this info section and I'm going to say up here, opacity 0. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And then I'm going to bring it down here and I'll set opacity to 100. And so now when I go through this, you'll see that that section will reveal itself and slowly the heading will come into, because it's at 100 and it'll never hit 100. That's why. No, what's happening here? Let me set this after. Yeah, it should. There it goes. So I actually have to bring it a little higher up. And there it's appearing. It looks like it's appearing a little. Yeah, I'd have to play with this a little bit. It looks like because this section's already in view, because it's set on this trigger reveal. So I would have had to put it into here, info section. So yeah, I'm not going to troubleshoot that right now. I was just explaining that section is where your content would be. And so, that will reveal the rest of whatever content you have on that website by doing it that way. Okay. Let's see. After the video, when you go, okay. Yep. Okay. I think that's it. Nothing else.
I think that is it.
Yep.
Great episode.
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and we're definitely coming back with more interactions. I think that's clear.
Yeah, I think right. I love the interactions, right? I'd love people can build. Maybe that's what it is, right? we can add all sorts of different interactions to some of these templates or whatever. Yeah, I'm happy to get into some of the more complicated ones. Maybe to spend the whole time building a single interaction that's more complex. The 3 we showed today were just kind of repetitive in the context of how you build them, but they're the baseline of how you build and set interactions. If you learn those 3 things, you know how to just set, hide, show, opacity, and move, and you start just playing with the different. Now you could add a little rotate. You could change the size of the shape. You could add layers that kind of come over top of each other. And so there's all sorts of little things you can add then. Basically, from this point, you just start adding and playing and experimenting, and that's how you get real good at the attributes or not attributes, but interactions. And go take Joseph Barry's course and Jonathan Moran. Those guys are pros at this. If you really want those buttery smooth, like the text reveal stuff and all those that's where you go. I'm good at some of these basic ones and kind of laying out the principles, but yeah, there's for sure people out there that do some of this better than me, and I'd encourage you all to check that out. So, okay, Ukulele, I appreciate that. Yeah, leave a like on the video, and we'll catch y'all Tuesday. I agree. Content like this is extremely helpful. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, everyone. That's all we got. We'll close it out.
Thank you.
See you next week.